This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so I'm pleased today to introduce Jeffrey Campbell, the Interim Director of Community Applications at Yale University ITS, and Rob Lancefield, who is the Head of Information Technology at the Yale Center for British Art. As advertised on the Basecamp group, they'll be walking us through a high-level overview of IIIF today and diving into its strategic value for organizations. So a really timely talk given the circumstances. And without further ado, I'll launch it over to them. And thank you both for giving this talk today. We're really excited.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks first to MCN and the Strategy SIG, especially Trisha and Douglas, and to everyone here for joining us in crazy times. This will be pretty informal. Our aim is to offer a 40,000-foot view of why it may make strategic sense for an institution to use IIIF for its online images. It's really likely that some participants here may have just heard of IIIF at a distance, while others may actually already have deep technical expertise in it, which is something neither Jeff nor I pretend to have. So to work with this range of starting points, we'll begin with an extremely brief, high-level glance at what IIIF is, then with an eye toward the kind of internal conversations that can lead to a decision about whether to adopt a technology based on its degree of local fit. We'll touch quickly on several of the broad ways in which IIIF can offer strategic value to many institutions that do adopt it, and to people in the networked communities they serve. And then to illustrate this more concretely, we'll look at some of these general factors in regard to how they are playing out at Yale in regard to the online delivery of images from museums and other collecting units. So first, what is IIIF? In the technical sense, it is a set of specifications for application programming interfaces, or APIs. In the professional community sense, it is a community of people working to advance and implement those APIs. And in a very practical sense, it's a means by which museums, libraries, archives, and other institutions that share images online can do so in the most strategic ways that can serve at least three broad kinds of strategic value. First is making those images interoperable with images from other institutions. Second is maintaining flexibility in regard to the software used to deliver images. And third is maximizing the long-term value and sustainability of the actual image files that are put online. So as some of you know, maybe all of you know, there are 4 IIIF APIs. And in this really quick glance, we're just going to focus on 2 of them ever so briefly, the image and presentation APIs. The other 2, authentication and content search, are less widely used at present, and we'll just note in passing that the IIIF website has extensive information about both of them, and in fact, of course, about all 4. So, the IIIF Image API. This API specifies the all of the various attributes of an image that a IIIF viewing client in a user's web browser would request from a IIIF image server, using a highly standardized syntax, all of which gets baked into one URL that client requests from the server, telling the server what the image is, how it should be cropped, which is to say the full thing or a particular region, how large that should be rendered out in actual pixel dimensions, whether it should be rotated, mirrored, flipped, quality, format. All of this gets baked into one nice, highly standardized URL, which we can see here. This is a widely reused illustration here from the image API specification, which without drilling into it the way we would if this were more of a technical how-to, if you just run your eyes over this, you'll see how that image gets selected to be a subregion, rendered out in certain ways, flipped, and so on. And all of that is through the image API. The presentation API is what enables IIIF viewing software to display descriptive metadata about an image and to support the structured display of such things as sequential leaves in a manuscript or the simultaneous display of different impressions of a print with information about each one, and any other kind of comparison or sequencing that you could imagine. The image in this slide shows the top part of a sample manifest from the presentation specification page at IIIF.io, the IIIF website. And these manifests are expressed in JSON, as you see here, if you're familiar with that. So still on the presentation API, here's an example from project Mirador. Along with the Universal Viewer and several others, Mirador is one of the most widely deployed IIIF viewers. And this example shows two IIIF images from different online collections. Both were pulled into a single IIIF viewer for comparative display together in one browser tab. And in this example, a descriptive metadata panel has been toggled on for each of those images, and that metadata was transported in each image's IIIF manifest. Along with enabling this kind of comparative viewing of images from different collections, IIIF is also well suited to a wide range of other kinds of use cases. Another classic one is the reintegrated viewing of sequential leaves of manuscripts that were long ago broken up and now may be scattered across institutional holdings on multiple continents, but now can together provide the material for an integrated viewing experience in a user's browser. And it also can enable inventive types of completely new interfaces and online user experiences built with IIIF conformant digital images. Links to some of those, which we don't have time to go into, but some are really, really cool and you should check them out, are listed on the awesome IIIF page, for which the URL is down in the corner of the slide. It will also reappear on a slide of links at the end of this presentation. So that may be the world's quickest look at a couple of the IIIF APIs, but I hope it's enough that you have a sense of the broad outline of the technical underpinnings of what we're talking about here. With that in place, institutional strategy, why IIIF? The details of IIIF's prospective strategic value, anything's prospective strategic value to any given organization, naturally depend on that organization's own particular strategic priorities. But that noted, implementing IIIF often can provide several kinds of value that figure quite prominently in regard to the strategic aims and the digital work of many, I'd say perhaps even most, museums and other cultural heritage institutions. First up, or at least first up in my mind, because it typically is sustainability. This is a factor here in at least two ways. First, because IIIF image servers and clients communicate entirely via standard IIIF compliant syntax. You can update or swap out either piece of software without having to re-architect or replace a whole end-to-end bundle of a server and a client that only know how to talk to each other. You can just change one without changing the other. Second, as an organization creates ever more images, it becomes ever more critical for the software being used to deliver those images not to have lock-in due to file formats, as used to be the typical case if we wanted to provide zoomable and otherwise navigable images. The widely used IIIF image servers nowadays use either of two standard single file formats to back any one image. These are pyramidal TIFF or JP2. So you can change out server software down the road without necessarily having to reprocess all of your image files in order for some newer, better server to be able to work with them, as would have been the case for certain other approaches, and still is for some. Another frequent point of connection and service to strategic aims is interoperability. Most museums' missions involve supporting education, research, self-directed learning, and other activities that leverage the cultural value of their holdings, often in foreseeable and sometimes wonderfully unforeseeable ways, by making it possible for people, teachers, students, scholars, really anyone with a network connection and a web browser, to view and present images of your collection, alongside images from other institutions, and to bring all of these together for seamlessly integrated side-by-side use. This was one of the driving types of use cases for the development of IIIF, and it continues to underlie a primary kind of strategic value it can provide to a collecting institution. And a third frequent point of connection between IIIF and high-level strategic aims is scalability, which often intersects, of course, with sustainability. And all three of these factors will figure in the next section of this webinar, which, by way of illustration, will sketch how some of this is playing out in current work at Yale. And with that, over to my colleague, Jeff Campbell.
Thank you, Rob. I am going to share my screen now. And here we go. All right. So strategy in IIIF at Yale. So why now? Yale has been an early adopter and supporter of IIIF. We've been active in the community for many years, I believe since about its inception. We've been involved with the various TRCs as well. There's been a small but growing number of developers at the university who have been engaged in various IIIF related projects. Many of them have been sort of small or researcher oriented projects, for example, 10,000 Rooms or digitally enabled scholarship through medieval manuscripts. That just rolls off the tongue easily. But those are two examples of some smaller implementations. But then there's also been larger implementations, like for the Yale Center for British Arts. Let's see, what else? At this point in time at Yale, we have a lot of synergy going on amongst all the different cultural heritage organizations, the three museums and the different divisions of the library. This is because we have a very large cultural heritage project taking place, which I'll get to in just a moment. But as part of that, at an organizational level, Yale has created a new position, which is the Vice Provost for Collections and Scholarly Communication, and that's being led by Susan Gibbons, who had been in charge of the library. Now she's in this Vice Provost role, and all of the cultural heritage organizations roll up to her, which this is really important because this allows there to be one vision and one strategy that is going to apply to all of the cultural heritage organizations. And did that advance? That did not advance. Here we go. Okay, so the cultural heritage project that's taking place. We are in search of the Holy Grail, which is to bring together all collections within the university under a single search interface so that they can all be searched simultaneously. Our focus on this project right now is public access assets, a common UI, visualizations, increased ability to share within ourselves, within the organization, but also outwardly to the world. The organizations that are taking part in this initiative are the three museums, the Yale Center for British Arts, the Yale Peabody Museum, and the Yale University Art Gallery, along with the library, including the Beinecke rare books and manuscripts library, our archives, as well as our digital collections. For this project to actually succeed, we really need to have common approaches for any number of things, including how images are rendered and delivered, how metadata is being transmitted, tying together schemas, and just really working in concert with one end goal in mind. For the museums, we've had an advantage, which is they are our dam partners. The museums for years have been working together on a shared dam solution. Now, in 2017 and 2018, and so actually let me back up for a moment. When I say the partners, this is each of the museums working along with ITS for a common goal. So where ITS comes in on this is each of the museums have responsibility for their particular parts of the solutions, and then ITS steps in where there is shared solutions, shared infrastructure that might be needed in order to allow things to come together and create a more holistic solution. In this particular case, this means that the dam products are managed by ITS, and the infrastructure that gets content into the dam is going through ITS processes and infrastructure. So in 2017, we migrated from our on-prem dam solution to a cloud vendor, and the cloud dam is leveraged by each of the museum's collection and communication staff to provide ready and easy access to all of the organization's assets. There's currently approximately 1.6 million assets within the dam from all of the museums. As part of the digital asset technologies service offering, there's some legacy functionality that is currently existing. And this includes our first attempt at bringing together all of the university collections, which is our cross-collection discovery solution, along with our content delivery service, which is focused on image delivery. So that sounds like that might be similar to what we're talking about as far as IIIF, and you're right. The content delivery service that has been in place predates IIIF. Now, when we shifted to our cloud dam vendor, we thought about leveraging their ability to render IIIF images as a way of achieving our objectives. And we decided not to go down that path. And the reason why is because it would just be too costly. With our 1.6 million objects, we'd be looking at approximately 80 or 90 terabytes of data, and that was just too much to spend. Plus, we already had workflows in place. We already had experience with how to handle some of these processes ourselves. So we decided to go down the path of making modifications to what we were currently doing. Now, this is what our workflow kind of looks like at a very, very high level for the entire digital asset technology service offering. You'll see along the left-hand side, we've got the 3 different collection management systems, one for each of the different museums. They each have their own, and they manage their own. They are feeding data and assets into a custom workflow application database. That tool does several things. It, first of all, takes a copy of the master image and it puts it into the preservation service. Now, prior to our shift to the cloud-based DAM, the solution that we had been using was different than what our library system was using for their preservation system. So as part of this convergence that we've started to see, we were able to drop one piece of technology, and we were able to leverage the library's preservation system. So that was a fantastic savings and a great opportunity to take advantage of institutional knowledge and resources. So copy of the master image goes to the preservation service. The master gets converted into a 4K image, which then gets ingested into the cloud-based DAM. And the third thing that happens is the master images are currently converted to any variety of derivatives. This is for the workflow that we are replacing. So there might be, based on permissions and rights, there might be different size JPEGs or TIFFs or thumbnails that are created. And then they're thrown into an S3 bucket, which the units are able to tap into for rendering on their web page and to make them available. Let's see. The objective of our IIIF initiative, though, is to replace the existing content delivery service with a by instead of delivering multiple derivative images, to provide an image through IIIF. The value of this is that we will be going through one set of processes for every single asset. CDS is really a backend service that provides web accessible image derivatives, and we get to focus on making sure that we've got something that's secure, something that's resilient, and then we get to focus on common approaches to creating manifests, having one process for creating all of the images, and we get to focus on system performance. Another objective that actually each of the museums had was they wanted to be able to have precise and accurate cost recovery. In the past, we've had one sort of large storage area, and it wasn't possible to slice and dice that up equitably for each of the units, to say, well, you're using 80% of it, therefore your cost is 80% of the cost. Part of the new infrastructure that is in place will be allowing each of the units to just pay for what they're using. Now, some of the decision points that we had for the museums was we needed to identify what we were going to be requiring to the manifest. We thought about requiring lots of data. We thought about the bare minimum data. And at the end of the day, we decided that we just needed the bare minimum. And that was going to be label, logo, and attribution. Part of the reason for that is not all of the collections had ample metadata. And to force collections to add metadata where it didn't exist either naturally or where they were in the process of finishing the cataloging would just slow down the whole project or possibly introduce more errors. So focusing on the bare minimum was, as required, was the best way to go. So the next thing that we had to decide upon collectively is how we were going to create the manifests. So we explored a number of different ideas, a number of different opinions, and we ultimately arrived at the idea that each of the units were going to vend manifest data via activity streams. This was valuable because each of the units are in control of their metadata. If there's a problem, they can fix it and it'll get pushed out. In the past, ITS had responsibility for managing and manipulating metadata, and if there was a problem with some of the conversion, that became really difficult to fix, or it became very difficult to troubleshoot. In this case, the problem, any potential problems are pushed closer to where that issue can be resolved, and it can be resolved far more quickly. And then the final decision was, what format were we going to be using? What format for the files? JPEG 2000 or pyramidal TIFF? We arrived at pyramidal TIFF. We had built a utility that allowed the units to convert images to both JPEG 2000 as well as pyramidal TIFF, and we wound up determining that the TIFFs were more performant, smaller in size. We also arrived at a compression ratio of 90% and RGB color profile. For ITS, some of the decision points that we had were what technology to use, and we wound up choosing Go. It wound up being selected for its performance, concurrency, and simplicity. For the image creation, we leveraged work. Our developer expanded upon work done by the National Gallery of Art, and he built his own Go library leveraging ImageMagick and VIPs. And the tests that we have been running have been extremely, extremely successful. We're able to churn out the pyramidal TIFFs very, very quickly and very accurately. And then finally, we needed to settle on our architecture. Within Yale, within Yale and within ITS, we're already using AWS, so the platform was easy. As far as the services, we sort of expanded what people were commonly using, and we're going to be using kind of a bit of everything. Now, I don't know if this slide is easy to see or not, but I'll just sort of briefly walk you through from the ground up. This is the design, this is the architecture that we've got in place, and we have each of the units providing their metadata via activity streams. We've got data going into our custom database application, which is routing data to our cloud-based DAM, et cetera, et cetera. But really, the main thing that I wanted to point out here is we wind up having about 5 S3 buckets. We've got three SQS queues, and we've got about 7 different modules running in Docker and 1 AWS RDS database leveraging Postgres as its technology. And this you can review at your leisure. This is the flow. It sort of talks about how we've got the assets going into a staging area. We've got our scaler, which is creating the derivative images. We have a metadata harvester, which is consuming the activity streams, putting data into the database, building out the manifests, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the end, we wind up having 3 different servers. We have a IIIF image server. We have a non-IIIF media server. So this is in case units are having non-IIIF images or non-IIIF assets like PDFs. We're not currently doing AV files through IIIF. So we still have a way of handling those. And then we have the IIIF manifest server. Now, the challenges that we were facing is really a number. First of all, we needed to get each of the 3 units to come to agreement on what fields we were going to be requiring, what were going to be mandatory fields for the for the manifests. Also, where was the metadata manipulation going to be taking place? Was it going to be on the ITS side of things, or was it going to be pushed back to the units? And then how were we going to be generating or harvesting the data for the manifests? Were we going to follow one process? Were we going to follow 2 or 3 processes? Thankfully, from the point of view, from ITS's point of view, and from the point of view of sustainability and scalability, we're always better off if we are able to agree and settle on one approach. Everybody is able to then help each other to come up to speed. We're able to build something that is that has the best performance based on one particular approach. It becomes easier to train people. If somebody leaves one position, then it's easier for the others to help bring them up to speed. So we did, of course, come to an agreement on the one approach for manifest creation. We struggled with trying to figure out how we were going to communicate data about image specifications. So things that fell outside of the manifest, but affected how the pyramidal tip was created. Some other challenges that we had were with the architecture. So I had alluded to the fact that that Central IT had some experience with AWS, but we didn't have deep experience. We didn't have deep experience across many people. So at the end of the day, we wound up hiring a consultant who we are currently engaged with to finish out the process to get all of the different services in place for us. And this is being used as a educational opportunity for other infrastructure staff as well as for our own teams. And what else? Yeah, the deployment process for the code is always interesting, and as part of our solution design, we still need to be able to support the old and new services. So we don't, when we do go live with this very soon, we're not going to be in sort of a big bang cutover approach. Each of the different museums will be able to cut over at their leisure when they choose to. And where we are today. So the development is about 70% complete. For the infrastructure, we have a professional service engagement with a third-party vendor. They have vetted the architecture, vetted the approach. We're creating infrastructure as code through Terraforms. And that process is basically complete in our sandbox environment. They've been testing it this week. The Jenkins build is underway for deployment, and we are expecting to go live around the end of May. And here are some links to a ton of information about IIIF. It's all available out on the web, and these links can lead directly and indirectly to some of it. It's got an eye towards big picture strategic aspects of adoption and implementation, which is to say the why along with some of the how to do it. Let's see, and that is pretty much that. If anybody wants to grab a screenshot of this, feel free to. I believe the slide deck is going to be available as well for people. And I think this puts us over to the final questions, comments portion of the evening.
Thank you, Jeffrey and Rob, so much. That was such a great overview. I, for one, am a complete neophyte to this space, so very helpful. Everyone, feel free to hop in with questions, whether via the chat or via the mic. And I see one from Megan already asking, what is Jenkins?
Jenkins is used for continuous deployment, continuous integration. So it's the process for the software to be deployed to the servers or the Docker containers that we're going to be using for our module. So the code for this image scaler, the thing that will convert the master images into pyramidal TIFFs, the scheduler, the sort of brains that are helping things to move through the workflow. Does that answer your question?
Awesome. Looks like the question was answered. So thank you. Does anyone else have questions for Jeffrey and Rob?
I'll actually jump in with one thing while people think of questions and formulate them, which is I was thinking, Jeff, as you were showing the wonderfully worked out diagrams of architecture and flow, for anyone here who is new to IIIF, it struck me that we could be scaring you unnecessarily. The complexity of those two diagrams largely arises from the fact that they reflect a lot of collaborative work in thinking about how to architect this at enterprise scale with images and metadata flowing in from multiple museums that all have their own practice. So there's this big matter of scale and big matter of integration from multiple sources, which is a lot of what the complexity you saw there serves and is driven by. In many cases, if one individual collecting institution were to think about what it would take to move to using IIIF as your approach to delivering images on the web, it could all look far, far simpler than that. So just to clarify.
That's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct, Rob. For example, if an organization just wanted to start playing around with IIIF, they would not need to create some elaborate process for automatically updating their image manifests. They could just they could just type out their manifest files themselves. It's when you start to get beyond the tens and 20s of images and start to get into the hundreds and thousands and such that having a process to more easily update, for example, that becomes very helpful.
Yeah, and these matters of scale and what it takes to make effective use of these technologies at different scales is charted out pretty nicely in the IIIF at Scale paper that you'll see toward the bottom of the screen of links, which Tristan Rodis had put together for MuseWeb just a few weeks ago. And there's a lot of good stuff in there if you're thinking about these questions of large and small and complex or simpler. There's some good things to think about in there.
Great. Are you both able to see the chat as well? Another question came in from Michael. I'm happy to read it.
I do see that. How will this technology apply or evolve to apply to 3D images, possibly derived from multiple individual pictures taken from different angles or from traditional scanning in the future? Or does something else for 3D exist that does what IIIF does for 3D images? We are not thinking about 3D images right now, is what I can say on the IT side. I do not know if from the collecting organization side, that's something that you would want to address, Rob.
Yeah, and I would shift the question itself off of what we're doing, particularly at Yale, to the broader question of 3D and IIIF. There may well be people on the call who know a whole lot more about this than I do, but I do know that in the IIIF development community, both specification development and tools development, that at least a few, maybe more, very smart people are thinking about what it might mean to leverage IIIF in connection with 3D content, whether that is a single file that represents 3D information or multiple files that can somehow be used together in that way. I frankly don't know much about that myself, but if there is anybody on the call who is deep into that, feel very free to unmute and say a few words. If not, if you were to go to the IIIF website at iiif.io and follow information there that leads out both to the IIIF Slack channels, where I think this has surfaced some, and also to the IIIF Google group. Whatever there is that's readily discoverable may be discoverable there.
And I do see that somebody posted the link to.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, there we are. Thanks.
What other questions might anyone have?
Or if not questions, are there people on the call who are currently using IIIF and in hearing what we've had to say about it today, may have been thinking of things that would either intersect with or interestingly contradict or in any way bounce off of what we've been sharing with you all?
Kim asked what consultant group we're working with. We are working with a company called WSM, Website Movers. They're out of Michigan. If you want to reach out to me, I can certainly share some contact information with you. And I will post my email address in the chat in case you need it.
And I should say, I'll pop back in here. If anyone has sort of continued questions or wants to keep discussing this topic, the Basecamp is a great sort of facilitator for that. And we can bring Jeffrey and Rob in as needed.
Absolutely.
Oh, great. We're getting some more good leads to IIIF 3D in the chat, if anybody is interested and hasn't noticed it coming in there.
And Christina has a question or a comment. Any final thoughts on obtaining buy-in from leadership, strategic value, any real bang for the buck type of use cases? So as far as obtaining buy-in, over the last 10 years, has it been 10 years? Over just about the last 10 years, the use and adoption of IIIF has grown, and as a result, at our university, it has been growing, and the senior leadership has been recognizing the value, the value of the interoperability, and the value of coming up with common ways of approaching these types of assets. The fact, and the Susan Gibbons, who's now the vice provost in charge of the areas, is a believer. So this did not require us to do a heavy duty kind of sales job in that respect. And so that's fortunate. The fact that we were going down the path of trying to bring together all of the different collecting organizations in order to achieve the goal of one common UI UX experience, one common portal or interface for searching across all of our collections meant that we needed to have standards for delivering any of the objects in addition to printed material. So I guess a final thought: have one person who's responsible for the strategy. That would be a great thought. So yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. I would just add in regard to what types of use cases can be most compelling when making the case within any given institution. That I think would depend greatly on what the institution's mission is, and particularly what senior leadership sees as how that mission plays out in regard to images online, whether it in ways that it currently does, but not as effectively as it might, or in ways that would be new and fresh. And to look at some of the various examples of how IIIF has been deployed in various organizations and think about whether any targeted one or two or three of those might line up most closely with the kinds of value that you could see images of your collection providing, whether that would be something that is a deep research oriented sort of thing, perhaps with another use case, multispectral, with the ability to bring up different spectral images of the same object with X-ray and IR and ultraviolet and what all else, or objects that have been broken out into different institutions and can be at least in reproduction, reunited on people's screens. And just to think about how some of those particular affordances of IIIF that have been built out and are available on the web might make somebody think, aha, that's kind of like this thing that we have in our holdings, and if we could do that, then that would be wonderful.
And I see that Megan has a question about, is our cloud DAM vendor different than our previous on-prem product? It is different. Our prior on-prem vendor was OpenText Media Manager, and we were leveraging them for both preservation for the museum's assets as well as the professional DAM, the DAM for the exhibit and communications and collection staff. Now our cloud-based DAM vendor is NetX, and we are leveraging Preservica, which had been in place by the library. So now all of the university is leveraging Preservica for long-term preservation, and all of the museums are using NetX for their professional DAM.
Any last questions, comments? Well, perhaps we all can have a few minutes before whatever we have lined up for 3 o'clock then.
Well, thank you both so much again. This was such an insightful presentation and a great discussion by the group. So I look forward to posting these resources following and continuing the conversation. So a big thank you. And yeah, we'll keep the conversation flowing.
Thank you, Trisha, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.